Good evening. In this week's Parshas Kedoshim, we have one of the most often quoted and rightfully so verses in the Torah that says, "Lo sikom v'lo sitar es b'nei amecha," do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the people of your nation. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Hashem, and you shall love your fellow as yourself. I am Hashem. That's the verse. And then these three words, V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, in case you missed its significance or importance, Rashi immediately cites the Torah's Kohanim, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. This is a great rule or principle of the Torah. This is a very basic element of the Torah. It's an important law. Everyone's familiar with the story of Hillel, where some version of Ahavta l'reacha kamocha was given as the entire Torah while someone is standing on one foot. Ahavta l'reacha kamocha is a very important mitzvah in the Torah, which commands us to do what? That is not so simple. Really not so simple. Let's dive straight into some sources on this, and we'll see if we can make a little bit of sense of this. The first source on page 1 is the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos. Now, I need help interpreting this, because this has been poured over by commentaries throughout the ages, trying to figure out exactly what the Rambam wants over here. So obviously we can translate the words, but what does he want exactly? So if you see on the left side, I underlined mitzvah 206. Don't ask the Rambam why it's 206. No one has yet ever given a real system for the order of the Rambam's mitzvahs. Mitzvah Reish Vav Hi, the 206th positive commandment, shetzivanu, that he commanded us, lahov ketzasenu es ketzasenu, that those of us should love those of us, meaning should love each other. Kasher nehav atzmenu, as we love ourselves. In other words, love someone else, love others as you love yourself. So far, so good, right? V'shetia avaso v'chemloso la'achiv, that his love and care, I'm translating chemla as care, even though you could say mercy or pity or any of these other words, but let's go with care. I think it's a nicer word. For his fellow, brother doesn't mean literally, it means a fellow Jew. Ke'ahavaso v'chemloso la'atzmo, like he loves and he cares for himself. Has the Rambam added anything other than the word care, chemla? Just repeated himself?
I think that he may have added by Ketzatenu that it's about groups of Jews.
Well, he doesn't mean groups, because it's an instruction for each individual Jew. It's an expression of those of us, meaning that you should love you. It means like that. I don't know if we need to focus so much on the plural, but I'm asking, what did he add when he said the second time? Achiv, okay. B'mamono ubegufo, financially and physically. V'chol ma sheyeh b'reshuso, and whatever is in his domain, I have to love and care for him in that area. Again, I have to love and care for him in all regards to his money and his body, and whatever is in his domain. Im yirtze oso, if he wants it, ertze ani oso, I want it too. Meaning, I want it for him, right? V'chol ma she'ertze la'atzmi, whatever I want for myself, ertze lo kamohu, I should likewise want for him. V'hu amro yis'ala, and this is why the Torah says, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Okay.
What if a person has very low self-esteem and they don't like themselves so much?
Or what if I want to punish myself? What if I like to fast?
It doesn't say to hate yourself, it says to love yourself.
Well, no, I like to fast. I really like it. I think that eating very little makes me feel energized and it makes me excited.
Don't
So I
impose
should.
that on anybody else, though.
Why not? It says here, whatever I want for myself, I should want for. However,
I want it, but it doesn't mean I have to force it on him. It just, you go over to him and you say, this really works for me. You might want to try it. But
okay, so you're actually touching on, and that's where I want to go here. What did the Rambam leave out in his instructions for this mitzvah? What did he leave out?
Sounds like you put a lot more in.
Well, there's something the Rambam forgot to mention entirely. Well, he talks about the Avo, but again, he says, I have to love him and care for him financially, physically, and whatever is his. If he wants it, I want it for him too. Whatever I want for myself, I want for him.
But it's
what I don't want for myself, I don't want.
It seems like some of the stuff that he mentions, for example, health is not something that he mentions. It seems to be...
No, his body. You should want for his body whatever's good for his body. What does the Rambam not say? It's almost...
want for myself. Want for him.
That might be included. What?
Where?
Well, it would just be the negative of this, which would be if I only want for him what I want for myself, then that means you don't want for him, perhaps. But there's something even more important that the Rambam left out. And it's
maybe that it's not, you're not talking about every detail specifics, but just generally, if you want to be happy, you want the other person to be happy.
There's no
What makes
synchrony.
that person happy might be something different than what makes
well,
you happy.
I agree. The Rambam seems to focus that you use your own, like the world does. Everyone buys as a present for someone something that I would like. That's how we shop for presents, right? So there's something even bigger the Rambam left out. The Ramban, without mentioning the Rambam, says, I don't understand. Tam ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha aflaga ki lo yikabel lev ha'adam sheyev es chavero ka'avaso es nafsho. It is impossible for the Torah to expect me to literally love someone else like I love myself. What's the Ramban's problem with the Rambam?
He's talking about
because they're also
emotion and not action.
Right. The Rambam didn't mention a single action. All the Rambam said was that you should love and have care for someone, physically, financially, and you should want for him. Whatever he wants, you should want him to have it, and whatever you want, you should want him to have it too. He didn't say anything about doing anything. The mitzvah does, at least the way the Rambam says it in Sefer HaMitzvahs, we'll see the Rambam might have changed it later, but at least what it says in Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Rambam made V'ahavta l'recha kamocha a mitzvah of commanding you to have a feeling. Now it could be that once you have that feeling, if you have that feeling, it'll end up turning into something, but that the mitzvah isn't action-based, but the focus of the mitzvah is the emotion, at least from the Rambam we read.
Can't be action-based in some respects, because if you've got only one jug of water and your friend is with you and there's only enough for one person, you're supposed to keep it for yourself. So you can't...
Because you don't love that person?
No, but because in the action, you can't say you should give him what you have, because that's not the halacha.
So why do I take it? Why do I take the water first? If I've got one jug of water, and only one of us can drink and live, the other one's going to die. So what's the halacha? I can keep the water. Why? Because there's a specific verse in the Torah that says keep the jug of water. Right? Which would mean that without the specific verse in the Torah saying you should keep the jug of water, the default would be that you should share, perhaps even because of this v'ahavta l'recha kamocha.
Doesn't that commandment, though, in reality, wouldn't that tend to cause the two people to start fighting each other for that jug of water.
Which the halacha that you can keep it?
Yes.
Well, the halacha that you keep it says that the one who owns it keeps it. Now, the fact that if there's only one jug of water, the people might start fighting over it, that has nothing to do with halacha. People might just be fighting over a jug of water because they each want to live. But halachically speaking, the one who owns the jug keeps the jug, it's his. If it would be, for example, a jug of water that's owned by both, then they would be, seemingly, required to split the bottle, and they end up both dying in a couple of days. It's only because your life comes first that you can keep your water for yourself. There's a question about whether you're allowed to claim. If, let's say, there's a bottle of water and you want to claim it, now, in other words, there is no owner, can you claim ownership? And it seems that you could, and then you can keep it. But if it's actually owned by both, then they would have to share. Yeah, but that's the halacha, what people end up doing. There's people who dressed up in children's clothing to get on a lifeboat in the Titanic, whatever.
And another problem is that you can't dictate a specific action, because what may be showing love in one situation in the same action might not be showing love.
Well, you could just make the mitzvah to do actions which do express love based on that situation, which you'll see. Let's take a look at the Ramban, the way the Ramban phrases it. We're now on citation 2. The Ramban, I actually was starting in the middle of the Ramban, so let's just continue from the parts that I underlined on page 2. Ki pa'amim, there are times, sheyahav adam esre'ehu b'devarim yaduim, that a person loves someone, his fellow, in certain ways, la'ativo ba'osher, where he wants to help the other person, to do good to the other person financially, v'lo b'chachma, but not in wisdom. For example, if someone has a business trick, they might take their best friend and bring them in on the deal, but not necessarily share this technique or strategy that they thought of because they want to keep it for themselves. So that would be sharing wealth, but not wisdom. Or if someone, the other way, someone might say, here's what I did, it was a brilliant idea, and I did it, and it worked, and I made $1 million off it after they finish it, after they did it already, when they could have informed the other person. So they give them the wisdom and the information after the fact, but they don't share their wealth. Right? But if you really love someone completely, says the Ramban, then you would want that this person should merit, you would want that person to have wealth and honor and knowledge and wisdom, but not only that he should be equal to him. You always want the person still would want to still be over and above the other person, and the Torah tells us, no, when you share your wisdom and your wealth and whatever it is, don't hold back. Even if it means that that person is going to succeed and become greater than you or higher than you or more successful than you, if you really love the person, you should love when good things happen to you should make good things happen for him. As a person does for himself.
So if this were the case, then that story you said of somebody who has a special trick in business would never be able to use it because he would be giving it to everybody else. Not just because Hafta l'reach ha'kamocha is everybody. Every Jew you're supposed to love as yourself. It's not just your friend. It's everybody.
You got it. So let's qualify what you're saying before we go on. We don't mean in a case where you're going to lose, because we already have this rule of chayecha kodmin that you get to keep the jug of water.
Right.
So it's not. So if you're going to lose because of it,
lose what? Your life or money?
Anything. If your life comes first, you still get to. If there's a business deal, otherwise no one should ever collect a paycheck.
Right.
Right? So we mean your life still comes first. That doesn't mean only your life. It means that whatever you need to take, we just mean that, let's say you own a business and the business could save money on a certain thing if they purchase from this company that sells wholesale and you know about it. And because of that you're having a little bit more success, you might be required to tell every person you know of this way that they too can have success because of the mitzvah. So I just want to qualify before we go there that we don't necessarily, in some cases maybe yeah, but we don't necessarily mean in any case where you're going to have a loss because of it.
Well,
is that fair?
Then no, because then it almost takes away from everything. Because you can always say, if I give them this idea, they can go open up a business and compete with me. And this is true because if you say for every Jew, then you have to tell anybody who's thinking about getting a job or buying a business or something.
So maybe you do have to tell in those cases where there's no, and maybe if there is a possibility of a competition opening because you share that information, maybe that's another case of chayecha kodmin. But we mean in a case, at least let's work with that case, where you're not going to, it's not likely that you're going to suffer any loss. Says the Ramban, you are required to share knowledge, wisdom, wealth, whatever the case is, you have to give those people those same opportunities and avoid this natural inclination to sort of keep for yourself so that you remain at the top of the totem pole, the king of the hill. You have to avoid doing that and push yourself to really share and give them the opportunity. So before we come back to the Ramban and the last few words in the Ramban, which are extremely difficult, but the Ramban is clearly making this a mitzvah which involves action as a result of the love, but very action-based. And then the Ramban puts 4 words in that just, we should close the book and all go home. How can we do this? V'lo yitein shiurim ba'ava. No measure to the love. No limit. You should care for every single Jew completely, just complete love with no limits, no limitations. Every single Jew, now you might say there are some Jews who don't qualify as a reacha, there's a debate about that. But you know what? But at least all the people who are reacha without question, you have to love them like you love yourself, not just love your fellow Jew, these are your brothers, these are your fellow clanmates. That's not enough. We're talking here, love them like you love yourself. You worried today about what you were going to eat for lunch? How many people do you know? You got to call them all up and say, did you have lunch today? Spend all day just calling people and see if they had lunch. Now you could say, well, I'm ruining my business, so I can't busy my. Okay, fine. But when you're not working, what are you doing for other people? Okay, so I need my downtime.
Shouldn't you be learning?
I should be learning. That's right. No, but I have to. Okay, so when I'm learning. But when you're not learning, what are you doing for others? So I need my downtime because then I still won't succeed in business. But when you're not, it's about other people.
So I think this is as vague as just saying "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," like the Rambam says. I think it's just as vague because
you're right, because it's a general mitzvah. I'm just focused on the fact that the Rambam makes it an emotion and almost leaves out the fact that you have to do anything about it. And the Ramban doesn't focus so much. I mean, he also mentions the emotion because the mitzvah of V'ahavta means to love. You can't go without. But he's focused more on, here's what you're going to do as a result of it.
And does the Gemara address this at all?
Well, the Gemara doesn't exactly say how to do V'ahavta l'reacha. I mean, the Gemara in certain cases invokes V'ahavta l'reacha, but the Gemara never defines the parameters in any one of these two ways.
Maybe it is an emotion. Maybe it isn't a physical or
well, the Ramban says otherwise. The Ramban says otherwise because he says if it's just the emotion itself, the Ramban seems to suggest that it is impossible for the emotion to be a requirement because you can't expect anyone to love anyone else, maybe a spouse or a child or a parent, but because there is something more powerful there, but to love a stranger who I've never met in my life, love them as much as I love myself, it's almost, use the word, ridiculous, but not in a silly way, but almost an impossible way. That the Torah should expect that.
It's much more possible to do for him more than you would do for yourself.
Right, because when I'm doing something for someone, when I do something for someone, when I'm at the place where I'm doing something for someone, and we'll see when I'm required to put myself in such a place, I shouldn't place limitations on it. I should just give, and give whatever I can.
Which part is the more important part of the mitzvah? The emotion or the doing? Can you do even if you don't feel it because you know that you're supposed to? Does that take a lot away from the mitzvah?
I would think...
What good is the feeling if you
don't
do anything about it? So.
Yes. Like we said, it could be that the Rambam would also agree you have to do actions. But the mitzvah is the feeling. Now, once you get yourself to the feeling, as a result of it, you're going to do things for that person. But that's not the mitzvah.
And what happens if because of the feeling you do something for someone, and you know how they say no good deed goes unpunished?
Right.
And so you start feeling exactly the opposite feeling you should be feeling.
Well, that might be true of any mitzvah. You know, let's say you blow shofar, a person goes to blow the shofar and cuts their lip on the shofar, so now they got hurt by the mitzvah. Okay, so it's a little different when a shofar hurts you and when a person hurts you. Right. That's true, but it's not the result of the mitzvah. That's just the person who's being obnoxious, and you know, that's a whole separate ethical dilemma. So, source 3, just to confuse us a little bit. Okay, let me ask you, what do you think of this Rambam? Again, with the same Rambam, who in Sefer HaMitzvahs made it all about, or focused at least on the thoughts. This is a Rambam in Mishnah Torah, Hilchos Deos, Perek Vav, Halacha Gimel, Mitzvah al kol adam lahov es kol achad ve'echad mi Yisrael kegufo. It is a commandment for each person to love every single one. Notice that the Rambam had to do as kol echad ve'echad. In case you thought that it means except for that guy, no, it means that guy too. Mi Yisrael kegufo shenamar v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Now the Rambam would have stopped there, and that would just have been a literal repetition of the verse, right? Lefikach, therefore, tzarich l'saper b'shvacho, you have to speak in a positive way about others. Speak their praises. V'lachos al mamono, and to care for or watch for their money, kasher hu chas al mamon atzmo, like he watches over his own money. V'rotza b'chavod atzmo, and as he wishes his own honor. So first of all, the Rambam just throws us completely off, because he makes it about 2 points. One, praising and making someone feel good, building someone up with words. And 2, the protection of money. Nothing about helping the person physically, which is interesting. The Rambam made it about praises and about money, but clearly, speaking praises and caring for someone's money is action. And so the Rambam, seemingly, has changed directions in Mishnah Torah.
Or maybe he's being more specific. He just, when he was giving the mitzvahs, he just listed the mitzvah.
Right. So
he didn't give you more details, and here he's giving you more detail.
Or let me just say a little further than what you're saying. Someone to suggest that the Rambam in Sefer Mitzvahs is telling you the mitzvah, which is the emotion, and here he's telling you not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is still the emotion, but lefikach means, and therefore a sign that you really love someone. But that's the mitzvah, but a result of that is going to be the test that you really love someone, is that you're singing their praises and watching out for their money.
But what if you know that they aren't so credible in a specific function, and someone approaches you, about their skill or their expertise?
Well, now you've got to care for the other person too.
Yeah,
So that's why you follow the system as it says in the Chafetz Chaim. Whatever the rules are of passing information, there's a Sefer Chafetz Chaim, and there he describes what you can and can't say. And as long as you follow the rules, you're doing what the proper thing to do is. But yeah,
I have to admit, I do wrestle with that when people ask.
Right? I mean, this is a serious question. When people call for information about shidduchim, about things like that.
Same profession,
Right.
you know.
Right. No, absolutely. So that's more of a Chafetz Chaim issue because you're dealing with V'ahavta l'recha kamocha in both areas. Absolutely.
What happened to, you're not supposed to give praises to people liberally, like you shouldn't really do that. It should
Well-
be, like we've learned, I think it was in this class, that you shouldn't really be, talking about people, even,
Well, let me answer that without going into this too much. It means that you should speak the person's praises where the praises aren't actually going to be to their detriment. It means, it doesn't mean you always say good things about someone. It means that you speak positively about them, you build them up, to others, you talk in a positive way.
appropriate.
I would insert that, yes. You have to insert that.
Well, because he doesn't say that.
Well, he's not
Sing your
getting.
praises.
He's saying the
Give
point
me
is
updates.
you should love someone, and as a result of that, speak highly of them. And where that's appropriate and where it isn't, he's not going into that over here. But
I just thought we were not,
Well,
learned somewhere, and I don't remember.
yeah, we have learned that many times speaking positively about someone really is to their detriment, but he doesn't have to qualify that here, at least. So now we have an interesting thing. We have seemingly this, especially if we're going to accept this explanation, that for the Rambam really it's still an emotional mitzvah, but he feels that emotion has to result in something, otherwise it shows that you're not really feeling it. But, so we're back to a disagreement between the Rambam and the Ramban as to how to understand this mitzvah. And I'll tell you there are some major, major differences between the Rambam and the Ramban, especially in terms of the difficulty of it. Although you could argue that they both have a difficulty. The Rambam's difficulty is that he expects you to have that kind of emotion for complete strangers. Just because they're fellow Jews, you have to love them like you love it. That's impossible. I want that some random Jew who lives somewhere out there, I want him, I wish, I desire for him to have the same success as me. I can want it, but I really love him that much, and I want it out of love. And according to the Ramban, it could be very difficult because it's really asking you, like we saw the words of the Ramban, you can't put any limitations on the love that you have.
But, if we're supposed to view all, that we're Am Yisrael, that we're all one unit, so to say, then to not wish well to the next person would be the same like not wishing your hand to work, or, you know what I'm saying?
I get it, and that's the rationale given.
This is, to love the other person is the same as loving yourself.
So let me ask you, the people who you have more direct contact of love with, family, do you call them and ask them how they're doing? Or do they call you? But do you ever do it? You ever call them up and check in on them?
Occasionally.
So do you have any friends who you don't check into as much?
Yes.
Why? According to this, you should be constantly going through the Achenu every day.
I would go crazy.
Absolutely, but
I'm not going to do that to someone else.
you should go down the Achenu and go through the list of all the people and call each person once a week, and everyone should be doing this. Maybe we should be dividing up all the alphabet between
All be going crazy as myself. That would not be doing anyone any good.
I get it. Okay, so my example, but in terms of that's what the kind of love we should have. Every person in that book, forget that book. Every Jew in the world, in every Achenu, in every community, should be a person who I'm worried about them. I care about them, and I love them like I love myself. And you know how much I do to take care of myself.
Wouldn't you become very anxious of someone you didn't know at all?
Only
Well,
because-
you know, but so just wondering what you had for lunch today and if you're okay.
Who is
Wouldn't
this?
you start to feel like you were being stalked?
Only because we're not all doing it, but we should all be doing it. We should all be doing it, and then it wouldn't be strange. Now, obviously, it's not literal, but the point is, what happened to this mitzvah?
Well, it sounds like when we say have a nice day, that we're fulfilling it.
How many people do you say have a nice day to?
Probably everybody you take leave of during the day. It's being used more and more all the time.
Right.
Maybe because of this.
Is it is the issue of the need a matter of prioritizing? For instance, if I know someone is lonely, they might, but I know when I call them, I want to have a block of time to listen or to visit with them, that help, there are extenuating circumstances around the person that might guide us to prioritizing, not that we shouldn't do with others.
Okay, so again, I think that the way that you're making that choice is maybe someone you know. But if I just heard that you know someone who's like that, I should be getting that person's contact information and finding a way, in a way where I don't seem like I'm some crazy person coming out of nowhere, but I should ask for an introduction to be made so that I can perform this mitzvah. Yeah, I think we're all stuck now.
No, we're not all stuck.
Why not?
There are only 24 hours in a day. Each of us only has 2 hands, we only have 2 feet. We have our responsibilities that we must fulfill, that are absolute responsibilities to our children, to our spouses. We have limited number.
I'm okay with that, but what about that time we spent to ourselves? How much time did I spend eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
We're supposed to love ourselves as much as we love everyone else.
I should split that. I should split that with the other people.
Not
Why not?
necessarily.
I could eat in 2 minutes, I ate in 10.
But if that's going to affect your ability to function appropriately,
Am I really thinking about that? Am I really measuring whether or not? Because if I really love myself, I would say that there are people who a phone call to them would be worth more to them than me being able to take 5 minutes to myself is worth. Exactly, and that's the question for how do we draw these lines? Because we've told ourselves that V'ahavta l'recha kamocha is something which we do on the side every once in a while more to the people around me, and that I'm somehow, let me phrase it differently. If I was to mention a kind of person, you tell me the first name that comes to mind. Thinking, who can I invite to my home? Maybe my home, I have a table with lots of space and I have all this food. I need some people to come and eat at the house. I'm not feeling so well, but I still can't. I'd rather suffer and cause myself health problems, but as long as I make sure that I have guests sitting at my table, because if there aren't guests at my table, I feel like I'm missing something.
But am I contagious?
Well, let's say it's not contagious. So who is someone who we know who did that, even though that person was very ill?
Avraham?
Avraham Avinu. He was sick. He had just had a very serious, very painful procedure. He was so sick that HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to be Mevaker Chola. That's the source. That's the first Bikur Cholim in the Torah. Is Vayera Hashem Elav Be'elonei Mamrei. Hashem appears to him in Elonei Mamrei. And Hashem knew that it was bad for him to have guests. And so Hashem changes the weather in that whole area. Hotzichama min artika, as his you just got circumcised gift to Avraham. Hashem took out the sun and baked down a chamsin, 130 degrees. Nobody's going out.
That couldn't have been very easy for Abraham, however.
I guess if the sun in the shade, he had the shade.
Did the air conditioning.
So, and Hashem sees that Avraham is actually experiencing more pain from not having guests than he is from his own procedure that he just had. And so Hashem says, we got to get him guests. The whole thing is different than what the system was. Avram's free will chose to actually experience more pain. Now the problem was there isn't anyone in miles. So Hashem sent 3 angels. The 3 of you go down, dress up like humans, and walk by and let Avram invite you so that he feels like he has guests. It might not even be a real Achnas Zorchim. As long as Avram feels like, that will relieve his pain. And Hashem says, this is the person that I want to build my people from. And so that's where he gets this promise that he's going to have a son. When the angels go to Sodom, they don't come in the morning when they're supposed to destroy Sodom. They come the night before. Why did they come the night before? Because they need to pull out Lot. Now we know Lot is only being saved in the merit of Avraham. And Lot is also being saved in the merit of David. Why? Because Lot would have a son from his daughter called Moab, and Rus would come from this child. So the commentaries tell us that maybe Moab should not be saved. They did some bad things, Moab. Who said we want Lot, the sodomite? Why do we want his grandchild? So the commentaries say, you've all heard this before, that Lot had to have a little mini test. The angels appear to him, and he risks his life to take them to his home. And through that process, he ends up being saved, his daughters end up being saved, and David HaMelech comes from that experience.
What do you offer to?
Yeah, he's got his own issues. But the point is that at least that part of the test, the Ramban takes him to town on that. He says, what kind of sick person is Lot? But that's a whole separate discussion. But at least in terms of the Achnasas Orchim, what he's supposed to risk his life for guests. Whoever heard such a thing? Since when you're required to risk your life for Achnasas Orchim? Anyone ever think of that question?
Maybe that's what they have to come up with.
Well, we say still your life comes first. Right? So what some say is that the test wasn't that he actually invites the guests. The test is that he loves them and wants to invite them. The fact that he invites them is just the result of that. So when you save your life first, in other words, when the person keeps their jug of water, they're still required to have the same amount of love for the other person and wish that they could share their water. But what can I do that the Torah requires me to save my own life first? But not because I'm happy in terms of the fact, obviously you're happy that you're alive, but not because you would be more happy that you would live than that person would live. And we're not just talking someone you know, but a complete stranger. Rabbi Rucham Levovitz, he says that unfortunately, this is a very powerful point, we allow so much or so many of our morals to be shaped by the society we live in. And the society we live in has such a me-first approach that we find it strange that the Torah actually obligates us to behave like Avraham Avinu. For us to say, we should, let me say this a little differently. Do you know anyone in the community who's a person who is Rodef Tzedakah V'Chesed? Without mentioning any names. Do you know someone in the community who's constantly pursuing charity and kindness and runs institutions and organizations, and maybe they run a loan society, free loan society, maybe they run the Bikur Cholim to visit the sick, maybe they run... Do you know such a person? Have you heard of such a person?
Yes.
So why isn't everyone like that? We think, says Rabbi Rucham, that these people are special people. Now, the truth is they are special people, but they're not. They're just doing what everyone's required to do. They're fulfilling V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. So they're doing what's a mitzvah. Now again, obviously chayacha kodmi, your life comes first, but in terms of the way that they dedicate themselves to others and give of themselves to others, we shouldn't be looking at them like they're doing something special. We should say that they're doing what they're supposed to do, and we just don't have the opportunity to do what we're supposed to be doing.
You know what? Just because certain people do things in a way that everyone is aware of it. I mean, or they have the parnasa that allows them to do things on a bigger scale, doesn't mean that other people aren't doing things.
Oh, no, you're right. There are people who are doing it, and they're actually doing a better job than those people, because they do it anonymously or they do it when they can. That's fine. I'm just saying, in terms of us looking at people who do it, as if they're somehow going beyond the requirement. And he says that's a Western culture perspective that tells you that I'm for myself, and that is the culture that we live in, is a society where you're not obligated to do for others. It's seen as an act of righteousness and piety and kindness and charity. The Torah considers that halacha. So just like you don't expect a cookie every time you keep Shabbos, you don't expect everyone to applaud you every time you look at the price of kosher meat and you look at the price of treif meat and you say, well, I keep kosher, so now we should make a dinner for you and honor you because you are fulfilling this mitzvah. We don't do that. It's an obligation. So if someone has the means, if someone has the opportunity, if someone has the capability to do, why do we live in a society where we have to encourage people with this? Everyone should be doing it, and if you do it, you're just fulfilling your obligation. Incredible words from Rabbi Rucham. He says the only reason why we consider people who go beyond and do so much for all the society, the only reason is because we live in a society that's self-absorbed. And he proves this. The Gemara discusses a case of, let me give you the example. Let's say you go on vacation. You go on a 2-week vacation, and you forget, and you left a door unlocked. So you left the back door unlocked. You didn't realize you left the back door unlocked. You come home, and you see that someone has been sleeping in the bed, sitting in the chair, and maybe eating your porridge. So you check your security cameras, and sure enough, the day after you left, someone let themselves in. Now, they cleaned up after themselves, made the beds. Maybe I should invite this person to come and stay by me. Right? They cleaned up after themselves. They made the bed. They tidied whatever they did. They replaced whatever they took. What would you do? Didn't ask you permission. Didn't, just lived in your house for a week.
You know who this person is?
Yeah, you have it on video. Someone in
You
the.
know them.
Let's say you do. Maybe you don't. Does it matter? What would you do? Some of us.
They feel very, even if they didn't harm anything or do anything, just the fact that somebody was in the house.
I feel very creeped too.
I think most of us would feel violated.
Right.
Right? And we would probably call the police.
Right.
And even if, let's say, we know that person, and therefore we don't want to start trouble, we would call someone and make sure that someone knows that that is just not okay. Except the halacha says that, I'm going to repeat the words, Kofen al midas Sodom, that we force the person, the owners of the house, to not be like the people of Sodom. What do you care if someone stayed in your house? Do you love that person? You love that person. You should be happy. It didn't cost you anything. They didn't ruin anything. They didn't break anything. They didn't even unlock the door. You left it unlocked. They just stayed in your house. Halacha says, get the exact words here.
But how likely is that to happen? If someone if someone goes into someone else's home when they're not there, it's not likely that they're there just to have a roof over their head.
Maybe because my example was, people aren't going to walk into someone, but sometimes you have, someone uses a space, and they use it because they know it's available, and it's not like, you see, if you go into a hotel that's made for renting, then you have to pay for it. But this is a home, you're not charging anyone rent, you never expect money, and all they did was, so why should you not let them stay in the house? Or at least, again, the language of the Gemara is, Kofen al midas Sodom. We say, why do you have to be like someone from Sodom? Let that person stay in your house.
Yeah, but if they asked you, you would.
No, they didn't have the opportunity to ask you. They didn't have your number. You went off on vacation. They saw that you left the door unlocked, or they found out that it was unlocked, and at one point the Gemara says they might even be doing you a favor by protecting your house.
It's true.
But
A house sitter.
right. The point that Rabbi Yerucham makes, see if I can find this.
Take all those calls that you don't want to answer.
Here's a list of your message.
That would be a real invention.
Yeah, I mean, Tosfos says, "Kofen al midas Sodom." I mean, so he says. You see from this that this kind of basic reaction that we all have because of this kind of society that we live in, and we do live in this society, where that's the expected. He says halacha would say otherwise. Halacha would say that you're expected to let that person be in your house.
I think that it's the whole thing of, they never asked you, you'd be happy to.
That's not the halacha. That's not the halacha. The halacha is
says
that
then you should be required to keep your doors open all the time. If that was the halacha. If the halacha is that a person should be able to stay in your house anytime he wants.
no, because there you're running a risk of endangering yourself. Again, you're a chayach hakodin, which means that you might lose as a result of it. People might take your stuff. Then you can invoke chayach hakodin. Right, there might be a loss for me. Here, this is after the case. He already lived in my house. There was no loss. That's why we said it like that. You forgot and you left the door open, and that person ended up using it. Let's go to another case. Let's say you have an item. Let's say your car. A car is not a good example because there might be wear and tear at each use. But in theory, if you left your car running and you ran into the store for 10 minutes, someone, if it weren't for this amount of wear and tear or risk and the insurance laws, whatever, that person should be allowed to take your car, run somewhere, and bring it back.
Or if somebody has
But you're not
a
supposed
lawnmower.
to take something that doesn't belong to you.
That might be that person's issue. We're talking about the love that you have for that person, that there should be no complaints.
You don't want him to violate a law, so you...
Well, you have the great story of the Chavetz Chaim where, again, there might not even be, you see, the case of the car is a little different because, like I said, there's a wear and tear issue. But staying at in someone's house isn't theft.
Sounds a little bit
It
more
is.
like...
Trespass.
It is.
Trespassing isn't theft. Who said that that's a prohibition? So,
Maybe, this is a tiny little case, but maybe this, at least to make it, for me, I can understand this is, okay, I wouldn't object. Let's say, like, you're in a school situation, and, that people hang up their coats and put umbrellas down and things like that. And, your coat and your umbrella are there. Somebody...
but there might run into theft problems.
Well, no, somebody sees they have to go help somebody in a car who's coming in. They don't have an umbrella.
Right, so they cannot take an umbrella in that case.
If somebody borrowed it, went and helped somebody else to, if I was the person owning the umbrella, I would think in that case, okay.
No, but there you might not be able to, because there you might run into issues of theft, where you take something and you take it outside. It doesn't matter. There again, we're avoiding cases where that's why the car is a problem, where you're actually causing, where you're doing an act of theft. That might be a little different. But here, in the case of taking someone's space, which would not be theft, that's his proof. Now, I want to take this to one more place. I only have a few minutes, so I'm going to cut us off.
Is this the example he uses about somebody staying in your house when you don't know?
Yeah.
That's the example.
Well, it's the Gemara's example of someone staying in someone's house. In those days, they didn't even have locks, but it was just you stayed in someone's house and you used it, and the Gemara says that person says, well, if you wouldn't have stayed in my house, you would have rented a hotel for, let's say, $100 a night. That was your other option. So you saved yourself $100 a night. Give me $100 a night, or $50 or something. And the Gemara says, no, you can't, because what are you, a person in Sodom? The person stayed at your house. Let them stay at your house. So,
without your knowing. I can't even understand how. Maybe this is my Western mentality then, but I don't understand.
That's what Rabbi Yerucham says. I'm not.
It's an
just,
invention of a
right, it's just like.
Only because we have this attitude of that's your most beloved person in the world. That's a fellow Jew who you love like yourself.
Right, but people.
Okay, I understand the danger, but there was no danger.
How do you know what they've gone through, what they've looked at?
That's a good point, but they didn't. They didn't. The question here is right. Okay. Now, again, I only have a few minutes. So I want to go to page 4 and tie this in. The Gemara there tells us the story of Sfiras HaOmer. Why are we so sad during this time? Now, besides the fact that it wasn't just the terrible events which happened during the Mishnaic times, but throughout the ages, bad things have happened during the sphere of the Crusades and things like that, which is why this Shabbos Mevorchim that we just had, even though it was Shabbos Mevorchim, we still said Avarachamim, because Avarachamim was established for the terrible tragedies which occurred, and since so many of them occurred during Sfiras HaOmer, we recite it even though it's a happier Shabbos because of Shabbos Mevorchim. However, the Gemara says, Amru, on page 4, the Gemara in Yevamos, Shneim Aser Elef Zugim Talmidim Haylo LeRabbi Akiva Migeves Ad Antiparas. There were 12,000 pairs of students that Rabbi Akiva had all throughout Eretz Yisrael. V'kula meistu beparak echad. They all died in one season between Pesach and Shavuos. Mipnei shelo nagu kavod zeh lezeh. Right? You've all heard this because they what? They didn't show honor to each other. What does that mean? They didn't show honor to each other. All kinds. Everyone's heard 100 explanations for that. And the next on the line telling kula meistu mi Pesach vad atzeres. They all died between Pesach and Shavuos, and there's a disagreement exactly how to understand that. Turn to page 5. The Midrash tells us, Yud Beis Elef Talmidim Hayil Rabbi Akiva Me'akov Ad Antipris. Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 students from Akko until Antipris. Different number of students, also different location. Might not be a contradiction. But Kulam Beperik Echad Meisa, they all died in one season. Lama Shahaisa Einehem Tzara Elu be'elu, because their perspectives were limited, they were stingy, if I could do it. They were holding back, they didn't want the other to succeed like they did. Tzaras ayin is stinginess. They had an ayin tzara for each other.
Does this mean that they were too competitive with each other? And
well,
as to what they were learning?
I didn't want to see someone else succeed. It bothered me when someone else had success. That's whatever stinginess is. Or I don't want to share my Torah. I don't want to share my Torah with others because I want to be the most knowledgeable. In other words, take whatever you call a stingy person with money, and that will actualize its way in many ways. They don't want to share, they don't want to spend, they don't want to see someone else have money. All those things, these were the students of Rabbi Akiva. Now, it actually makes it better because Nagu Kavod Zelazeh, people think that they spoke disrespectfully to each other, they were rude to each other. No! We started off this class saying, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. This was Rabbi Akiva's great teaching. So his students heard from him that you have to respect each other. They would not even be called students of Rabbi Akiva if they called each other by bad names. What we mean is that they, maybe because they were students of Rabbi Akiva, they were expected to really go to the other extreme and to love each other and to have that care for each other, to which the Medrash continues out in the next line, when Rabbi Akiva got his new students, he said, Banai, my sons, Harishonim lo mesu ala shahoise eneim tzara elu be'elu. The reason why those first students died is because they didn't care for each other's success. Be very careful, don't do what they did. Amdu, and so they arose, umilu kol Eretz Yisrael Torah, and they filled all of Eretz Yisrael with Torah. Those new students of Rabbi Akiva took the lesson of the students who died and understood that we're not just talking about respecting each other, but we're talking about actually going out and providing for each other. This is a level of Ahavta l'reacha kamocha that's not just considered some great pious deed. This is expected of all of us. Like the Rambam, like the Ramban, however we want to read it. I wish we had more time to go into exactly the parameters of each of these opinions. But it's clear to us that this chiyuv of Ahavta l'reacha kamocha, I think we all 16 million of us have to agree that we're not doing a good job. If we would be doing a good job, we would already have been redeemed. The Jewish people would not be suffering with so many of the troubles which we have today. Sfiras HaOmer is the time when each one of us, mitzvah al kol adam lehov es kol echad ve'echad mi Yisrael kegufo. Let's work. Let's start with let's start with the emotion, with the feeling. Let's find in our hearts the love for every Jew, and however it translates itself for you. And I think we've made it very clear. It doesn't have to cost you. It doesn't have to take from you because you are chayecha kodmin. But at least let's start with what doesn't cost us anything, and that's that feeling, the emotion, the care. And with that, hopefully we will bring the Gula, where we will all experience Acharis Kareshis once again, Matan Har Torah, as we had before. Thank you.
Thank you.